Okay, about 30 more seconds and we're going to start, so please take your seats. Welcome, everybody. It's really great to see you here tonight. It's just a pleasure to have so many people in the room here to find out about gas leaks in Acton. Thank you very much for coming. This event is put on by Mothers Out Front Acton, which is taking steps to help Acton understand and address its challenges around gas leaks. My name's Martha Rounds. I'll be your moderator this evening. I am a member of Mothers Out Front Acton. So just to get you oriented for the evening, we'll have several speakers who will be talking between now and around 8, or a little bit after 8. We'll have a short question and answer period after that. And when our formal meeting is over, we invite you to go to the tables around the back or this map of Acton gas leaks and just orient yourself to gas leaks in Acton and think about steps that you can take to address this problem. So we'll have our speakers. If you have questions, please hold them until the question and answer period is over or is begun. If there are questions we can't answer, we're going to put them in a so-called parking lot, and we will get answers to whatever questions that we can. And we're also keeping a list of to-dos that come out of this meeting. So welcome, welcome again. It's really great to have you all here. And I just want to introduce Jude Aronstein from Mothers Out Front.
Thank you. As Martha said, we're really glad everyone's here this evening. And hopefully you'll have a chance to check out the energy exhibits, if not now, afterwards. Mothers Out Front is mothers and grandmothers and others coming together to make climate change an issue that our decision makers can't ignore anymore. That's the bottom line. This evening, there's a lot of people I want to thank. I want to thank my Mothers Out Front team. If you guys will stand up with your shirts. Yay, yay. I also want to thank the Resource Force team from Acton-Boxborough Regional High School with Kate Crosby. They have been working with a map of all the gas leaks, including the measured leaks. We know the size of our leaks in town now. So we are really thrilled that they're going to be presenting this evening. Thank you to the town of Acton for allowing us this room, and for all the boards and committees in Acton who really have been unbelievably supportive of a number of green initiatives. Also thank you to Indivisible Acton and Green Acton. They are our co-sponsors for this evening, and Mothers Out Front clearly is so lucky to be in this town, and you are lucky to be in this town because we have amazing green allies. And of course, Katie Green will be here speaking tonight, and Audrey Schulman, Nathan Phillips, and Jamie Eldridge as well to speak to you. Very briefly, I raised my 3 children here in Acton for 20 years, and I'm someone who's always cared about environmental concerns, but in a quiet way. I do drive a Prius. I have solar panels. I buy LED light bulbs. And that's the extent of it, or that was the extent of it. And climate change, frankly, is a tough thing to face. So why am I standing here? There was no one moment when the passion just struck me, and there was no one moment when the fear of standing up and speaking out hit me. It hasn't come yet. And I'm in the process of facing myself and facing climate change. But what ultimately brought me here were the gas leaks at the bottom of my street. Occasionally, I would see flashing yellow lights of a repair truck, and I assumed they were fixing them. And I would go back out walking on my evening walks, and they weren't fixed. And this went on for years. And I found it annoying, but I didn't really understand the impact of methane. So one day, a neighbor came, and she gave me a photo, actually on her phone, of a puddle where she walks with her dogs. And it was a puddle with bubbles coming out of it. And another day, I was walking the same route, and a town truck showed up to take down a tree that was near one of the leak locations. She needed answers, and I needed answers, and we all need and deserve answers. And that's where Mothers Out Front came in for me. I found a foothold where I could learn and talk and take action. It's a place where I can speak up for my children and for your children and simply, frankly, for the planet. So at our forum tonight, we've gathered experts for you so that you have the opportunity to learn and to gather support around you and to hopefully move out of your quiet. So that's it. There's a lot to learn. Let's begin.
Thank you, Jude. Next, I'd like to introduce Selectwoman Katie Green.
Thank you, Martha, and for Mothers Out Front for having this forum and for inviting me to speak just very briefly about some of the Town of Acton's efforts around natural gas leaks and sustainability. So I just want to start by saying that I view one of my roles on the Board of Selectmen as trying to amplify the voices of others, and really this issue and everything that the town has been doing related to it has been a direct result because of the voices of all of you in this room and many others as well. So a lot of it started with Jim Snyder-Grant and Deborah Symes from Green Acton coming to our Board of Selectmen hearings where we are requested for permission to have a street cut to allow new natural gas connections. And they questioned, why we were allowing these, or, and brought up the issues with this. And then many members of Mothers Out Front started to join them, and the voices grew, and the Board of Selectmen listened and realized that we need to think about this and think about how we can address natural gas in our town and sustainability more broadly. So we have been working, and I've been working with a group that's been really wonderful because it's involved so many people. So again, Green Acton, Mothers Out Front, Resource Force, and then our town engineer, Corey York, have been coming together to think about natural gas and try to address it on two fronts, both addressing the natural gas leaks in town and also trying to discourage new natural gas connections in town. So tonight, I think you'll hear primarily about the leak issue. And one of the things the town did was support funding for having a third-party person come in and map all of the leaks in our town, and that's what you'll hear. And then we gave that data to the Resource Force, and these are amazing students who have put this all together, so it's available on the map here and online, and you'll hear more about their work. But my understanding is we're the first town in the Commonwealth to actually have fully mapped all of our leaks. And one of the great things about this is it actually has put us ahead in terms of getting Eversource's attention, where they are more willing to, I think now, come out and address some of these because they know we're on top of them and we're keeping track of what's going on in town. So that's been important. And then we've also been working on developing a sustainability policy, and we've been trying to do that in a sort of very collaborative way. So we have a draft that we've worked on with Green Acton. We've gotten input from, we asked for input from every board and committee in town. We received that, and we have a new draft. We were supposed to talk about it on Monday night, but due to other issues have pushed that out. So soon, at the hopefully end of April, beginning of May, we should have another hearing on where we are with our sustainability policy and getting, again, more input on that. And the idea is to put that in place so that then we can build all of our programs and support different efforts off of that. So it's been a great effort. There's a lot going on in the town, and I've just been really impressed with all of the members of the public and all of the boards and committees and other, unofficial, not town-sanctioned groups in town, but that have come together around this issue. And I'm just excited to keep working on this. And again, my huge thanks to Mothers Out Front for putting together this forum tonight to provide more information to all of you. And I hope that you all continue to keep staying involved and keep pushing the board. It's really helps when you're there and up front and keeping this issue front of mind for us. So thank you all again, and to Martha for having me tonight.
Thank you, Katie. Next, I want to introduce some of the students from Acton-Boxborough Regional High School who were involved in creating that killer map over there. So please come on up, introduce yourselves, and you can do your presentation.
Hi, I'm Vaibhav Gupta, and I'm from Acton-Boxborough Regional High School, and Kevin and, oh, sorry.
Yeah, I'm Kevin also, so.
And we're both from Resource Force, and we have here a presentation to give you on the Acton's methane leaks. So we really want to start with why gas leaks are important. We hear about them all the time, but let's just get into the depth of it. So gas leaks are mostly composed of methane, and methane is a really potent greenhouse gas, which is 84 times more potent than carbon, and carbon is usually the standard that you use in greenhouse gas emissions. So because it's 84 times more potent, that means that if methane is leaking into the environment, it's really serious. And this is especially for the first 20 years. And overall, there are 3 major impacts with greenhouse gas emissions. First being health, second being economics, and third being environmental. When you look at it in an economics perspective, a lot of the taxpayers are losing money, about $135 million annually, and that's just for residents in Massachusetts. And looking at it health-wise, methane especially exacerbates asthma and other respiratory problems, so it does have a health component to it. And lastly, we need to consider safety in this, because if methane leaks from the gas pipes, then there is a possibility of a gas explosion, because as we all know, methane combusts really easily. Okay. And in order to get a better understanding of exactly how we got here, we need to look back at the past and analyze some key events that occurred. One being the Howarth and Ingruffa study, which was conducted in Canada. And what they found in the study was that even though methane flows through pipelines to get to our homes, there is some methane that usually leaks, and it's much higher than what we usually expect. When this study came out, it was really groundbreaking, because this is not what we expected before. And the second event was the passage of an act relative to natural gas, which basically stated that utility gas leaks have to report the gas leaks that are occurring. And these 2 events were really critical for the momentum of the gas leaks in the environment happening. After the publication of the Harvard and Boston University Methane study, it found that 2.7% of methane that was being transported in Boston city pipelines was actually being lost. So that methane that goes to people's home on its way, approximately 2.7 was lost. And when you extrapolate that to the whole state, to all of Massachusetts, and you can do this because the same material that was used to build the pipelines in Boston was used throughout the state, and it was laid in a similar method. You almost get 10%. The amount of gas that's being leaked into the environment has the same greenhouse gas potency as 10% of all of the greenhouse gases in Massachusetts. And this is a really significant amount because only a very small percentage of gas is leaking, yet it is contributing such a large percentage. Again, like 10% of the total greenhouse emissions of Massachusetts. That also includes the cars that we drive, so a lot of the CO2 coming out from that as well. Third, there was a study with Boston University and Hendrix ETAL, which stated that of all the gas leaks that are present, approximately 7% of those gas leaks are what are designated as the super emitters. And like the name suggests, these super emitters are the ones that release the most gas into the environment. And if there were some comprehensive methods or actions that were taken to reduce the super emitters, then we can reduce 50% of the methane that's being released into the atmosphere. And it kind of shows us that we don't have to really fix all the gas leaks, but if we can fix the major ones, then we're much better off. And lastly, and most recently, there was the Massachusetts Omnibus Energy Bill, which stated that all environmental impacts had to be taken when new gas leaks were found. And again, by this, you have this momentum that's building up. And with this momentum, we hope that in the future we can do some legislative actions. And here we have three very wonderful people here, Nathan Phillips, Audrey Schulman, and Bob Ackley, who will later speak to you more in detail about gas leaks and their role in the environment. For my last slide, I have the MAPC and HEET study, which basically found that, which conducted a study in 2016 about gas leaks in the greater Boston area, and this included 15 towns, and one of the towns was our beloved Acton. And when they did conduct this study, they found that there were actually a lot of gas leaks prevalent in the area, and Acton surprisingly had the highest number of super emitters. So in the following year, we actually did a larger comprehensive study on the entirety of Acton, and Kevin will actually later talk to you more about that.
Right, so the Board of Selectmen, they saw the results from the previous study, and so they decided to sponsor an entire town-wide survey so we could get information on gas leaks in the entire town. So Bob Ackley came back and he surveyed the whole town, and he found 234 leaks, about 80 of which also had trees nearby which were being affected by the methane released, and about 120 trees in total could be potentially affected by suffocation of oxygen from the soil and potentially die. So here's a picture of the results. And you can see here, it essentially shows a graph of methane concentrations on the roadways where Bob Ackley had driven his mobile analysis vehicle. And you can see the very large spikes sometimes, which are the super emitters, and that they have very high methane concentration. And of course, while this study was going on, there were also other initiatives going on as well. There was the large volume leak study being conducted, which evaluated different methods of measuring gas, and they actually found that the leak footprint method, where you measure the square footage of soil that's affected by methane and has saturation of methane in the soil, worked best for predicting how much methane was actually being released. And the bar hole method, which National Grid and the other utilities had been previously using, wasn't actually that reliable in comparison. And they presented these findings at the Common Goals Uncommon Partners Summit, in which they also gave a shared action plan that detailed a plan where the utilities had agreed to fix super emitters above 10,000 square feet within a year, and they also agreed to switch to the leak footprint method. And so these two actions, they spurred new DPU regulations, which hope to take into account some of the more environmentally significant impacts of gas leaks, such as the promises that the utilities had made to fix the super emitters. And of course, all of these are leading to one thing, which is the eventual repair of these leaks, preferably the super emitters first. So with all of these studies available and all these data sets, we thought it would be very interesting to put them all together on one map so that you could see all of the gas leaks that had ever been cataloged. So there are 234 on this map that we made, which is also available online and over here. And 234 of these were found by Bob Backley, but there are also about 100 that weren't found again in the comprehensive study that Bob Backley had done. So these might need some further data to verify and see if they still exist or what had happened to them. And so now we're going to take you on a short interactive demo of the website, just so you can get a feel of the leaks around the town.
So this is the So this is the website that we have that Kevin and Resource Force, mostly Kevin, helped build.
Arlington Street where? Which one?
Haynes Court, is that it? Just look up Haynes Court.
Put up Haynes first?
Yeah.
How do you spell Haynes?
H-A-Y-N-E.
Gotcha. There you go.
All right, so here's one of the leaks reported by National Grid. As you can see, they don't actually have that much information, but you can see it's been reported in 2016 and 2017 with its different reported dates. There are no sizes because National Grid doesn't publish the leak sizes. So while they do have the list, you don't know which ones are environmentally significant. But you can see all the data that's been available, like the National Grid number and, of course, where it's located. There's also 51 Arlington Street. Now, this one's a little interesting because it's actually one that showed up on the 2017 National Grid repaired list, but it's also on the Town of Acton survey that was also done in 2017 later, which kind of suggests that while this leak had been reported as repaired, Bob Ackley had actually found it again. And this was actually the case for about 10 of the 43 repaired leaks that we know about. So it definitely suggests that these leaks need some further review to see if they've been truly repaired and what the condition of them really is. Yeah. And I believe there's 54 Prospect Street.
I'm sorry, 54.
Prospect Street? Yeah, so this one's an example of a leak that was reported by Bob Ackley in the Town of Acton survey. And this one's just interesting because you can see it has a leak footprint available along with 2 trees being affected, which actually show that this leak is affecting 2 trees nearby and potentially causing suffocation or injury to these trees. All right. So, yeah, that's about it. There's some further readings on the PowerPoint. Yeah, so there's some further readings on the PowerPoint here with these article names if you want to check it out and get more information about these gas leaks. But otherwise, that's about it.
Thank you both so much. It's an honor and a pleasure to have you here. It's a bit of a showstopper kind of moment in a meeting where we could all just ask you questions and find our addresses and stuff like that. But we're not going to do that. Next, I would like to introduce Audrey Schulman. She is the co-founder and president of the Home Energy Efficiency Team, HEAT. And she's been instrumental in moving this process along. So please, Audrey, come forward. Thank you.
So a lot of what I've said, was going to say has already been said, so I'm just going to say what they said with pictures. That was fantastic and incredible. Yeah. So natural gas is potentially explosive. This is a photo in, I think, 2014 of an explosion in Harlem where 12 people were, if I remember correctly, hurt, or I can't remember at this point. Anyway, there's lots of explosions all the time. A few months later, there was a big explosion in Boston also. Kills trees because the gas percolates through the soil and displaces oxygen. Trees actually need to breathe oxygen through their roots in order to live. It's a powerful greenhouse gas if it's emitted uncombusted, right? If you burn gas, it turns to CO2. We know that's bad. But if it is not burned, it's emitted as methane. And methane is much, much more powerful. You'll see a lot of different numbers around this depending on the time frame used. I use the 20-year time frame because I believe the next 20 years is sort of what the period we have to make up our mind about how much we want to damage this planet. And as you heard already, it's paid for by us, the ratepayers. So here's Bob. And Bob, do you want to sort of wave hi? If you guys, Bob's the guy who did the survey, and he knows more about gas and gas leaks than anybody alive. So if you have any questions, we are just, restating what he knows much more deeply. Here's the beautiful equipment that he uses. It's a Picaro. It's got a little sniffer that goes out the front of the car, and you drive it around, and it smells the gas and uses GPS to figure out where it is. From that, you get these maps that you've already seen. Here is Acton, slightly visually different than that other one you saw. Here's a different version of that Google map with all the leaks. The blue ones are just normal leaks. The green ones are the ones that have trees that are being hurt. And the yellow ones are the ones that are over 2,000 square feet. They are, the frequency per linear mile of street is 1.4 leaks per linear mile of street, which is very high. Nathan, how many did you get in Boston? We had 4. 4 per mile? So that's more. But the average for the state is about, I think, half of a leak per mile. So that gives you some range. As you already heard, just 7% of the gas leaks are a lot bigger, right? These 7% of the gas leaks emit 50% of the gas. So if you can fix these, that's the fastest way to reduce the emissions for the least cost and disruption. You don't want to you don't want to rip up streets unless you have to. So we did the large volume leak study with Nathan and with Bob, and found that those leaks that were over, there's Bob, that were over 2,000 square feet of gas-saturated soil. So Bob goes around with that flame ionization unit that you see there, and he finds how far the gas has permeated through the soil. And he uses a lot of other devices also. And that's how you get the gas-saturated soil. That's how you figure out how far it's extended through the soil. That's to give you a visual, because sometimes this is hard to understand. So those are that's how many large volume leaks you have, how many super emitting leaks you have. That's, I believe there are 23 here in Acton, which is about 10% of the leaks. It's a fair amount. And if you can get these ones fixed first, then you're likely to reduce the emissions, cut it in half fastest. I would recommend working with National Grid to do this. They have agreed through our shared action plan, so they worked with us National Grid, Columbia Gas, Eversource, they all worked with us on our large volume leak study, and they deserve really great credit for that. And they agreed to this plan, which was really sort of stunning, where they would identify the large volume leaks using our criteria that we scientifically proved of anything bigger than 2,000 square feet gets fixed first. And this is, aside from safety, right? Of course, anything that's going to explode gets fixed first. But of everything that remains, right, everything that remains, then the biggest leaks get fixed after that. The repairs happen within 12 months to 5 years, depending on local infrastructure and the size of the leak. We do we randomly check to make sure that they're doing their job, so we have independent verification. They report on the DPU file room what they've done, so it's publicly reported. Transparency is always good. And they will reassess annually with heat, and probably with Metropolitan Area Planning Council also, that they are doing a good job and that they're doing it in the best way possible. So this has been pretty impressive, what they've agreed to, and we all just need to sort of encourage them to keep doing this. In case anybody hasn't seen it before, because who would not want to spend their time this way? This is the DPU file room. This is where you can get all the information you've never wanted to get, and I've become incredibly familiar with it. So if anybody wants to ever search up this data, here's the information. You go to that website, you type in those codes, and you can get lots of data. Here's that Fixing Our Pipes study that was discussed. HEAT, my organization, worked with Metropolitan Area Planning Council to do that survey of 15 different towns. We talked to lots of DPW managers and learned lots of information, found best practices, found case studies, learned all sorts of incredible stuff. You can find it all at this website, fixourpipes.org, including this lovely all sorts of interactive stuff, but you can figure out how quickly you want to move and how you're going to reduce your costs. We tried to figure out the best ways to fix leaks and save everybody money. Coming up soon, this won't be happening in Acton probably because you all are totally on top of this, but this spring we will be having a different sort of version of the Picaro. This is Los Gatos ABB come through and do another mobile survey of Massachusetts to help find the large volume leaks so that the utilities, they begin to use leak extent to identify the large volume leaks so that they have a big pool to start fixing immediately, as well as all the leaks in Acton, the big ones, right? So I was going to say, this was supposed to remind me to say that hopefully that map that you've created will be updated as the leaks get repaired so people can learn. So I guess you can check back to that map that is now on the town website so that you can learn which leaks have been fixed and which ones haven't, so that you're up to date on information. And then I'm going to talk quickly about how else to save energy. Because that's what we do. You can get a mass save assessment. If you want to save energy in your own home, get a mass save assessment. They're free. They'll replace all your LED, all your lights with fantastic, efficient, free light bulbs. Then program your thermostat. Every degree you can lower your thermostat for 8 hours a day will save you, I think, 1% of your heating bill, if I remember that right. And by the way, this information is all from me making lots of mistakes in my own home, so this is what works. Then insulate and air seal your home. Adding insulation to your attic, if you don't have it, will save you over 20% of your heating bill. If you add insulation to your walls, and you have not done that yet, it'll save about 18% of your heating bill. It'll decrease the sound from the outside. It'll reduce vermin. It's just great. and then switch to state-of-the-art electric appliances like heat pumps. Because the sooner we can, you can't green natural gas, but you can green electricity, right? You can make electricity renewable. So go to electric and then get renewables. And you will reduce your emissions quite quickly. So this is 6 steps to easing your impact on the planet. And don't replace your windows. It won't ever earn out. I know, I made that mistake. I think that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Audrey. Our next speaker is Dr. Nathan Phillips. He is a professor of Earth and Environment at Boston University and a tree physiologist. So welcome.
Thank you. And I have even less new things to share with you, given those 2 very superb talks preceding mine. And I won't even have that many good pictures. This is one, but figures and tables probably, being the academic. So this is about half a mile from my home in Newton, and this is the poster child for the gas leak problem for me. I learned about this issue in 2010 by complete chance by meeting Bob Ackley, who was surveying the gas leaks in Newton at the time. And so my son and I were taking a walk down the street, and we saw him looking at a dead and dying tree. And that's what hooked me, because I'm a tree physiologist. I study trees. I have a little bit of imposter syndrome because this became a gateway for me into this whole other issue of gas leaks. And I found out I accidentally had a toolkit to study this because I study greenhouse gases and how trees process greenhouse gases. And then methane was, apparent quickly, was a very, very strong greenhouse gas, as has been said. So this picture here from Google is back when the tree, you can tell this 60-inch copper beech tree, magnificent on the campus of LaSalle College. And you can already see it's kind of crown shy. The leak is under that car there. And then last summer, it finally died. So that's a real tragedy, and this happens all over the place. So that's what got me hooked. And then I found out that this is a big global problem. The climate change issue is a big one. And in fact, methane has increased globally as a percentage even more than CO2 has. So 150 or 200 years ago, it was 0.75 parts per million, and today it's up around 1.8 or 1.85 parts per million, or 1,850 parts per billion. And so this is a big climate change impact, and it continues to increase. You can see from NOAA data that it's increasing over the last several decades, and since the fracking boom, in the mid-2000s, it's actually started to even accelerate. And there's been some controversy about, well, agriculture is a source of methane, wetlands and swamps, fires, incomplete combustion. There's a lot of things that can be generating methane. Maybe it's not fossil fuels. But the most recent study from NASA and investigators in the Netherlands that came out in December of last year found that fossil fuel oil and gas is the largest contributor to the increase of global methane. So out of 25 teragrams, that's 1 trillion grams, 17 of that is due to fossil fuels. And so they used a variety of measurements from satellites and other complementary measurements to come to that conclusion. So humans are causing this problem, from the fracking fields all the way to the leaks here in Acton and in these areas. So I want to quickly just give you a little primer on what we found. So a lot of this, again, is going to be a little bit of a repeat, and talk about the greenhouse gas impact and then some solutions. So this study in 2013 is the first study of its kind. We got funding from the Barr Foundation to map the gas leaks in Boston. So we documented 3,356 of these gas leaks in the city of Boston. And from there, the questions just started to mount. What happens when you go outside of Boston? How much do they all add up to? A bunch of questions that came out of that. There's the paper that we published in 2013. And then we found out, well, it's throughout the eastern seaboard at least. Washington, D.C., we mapped with Rob Jackson and others 6,600 leaks. Bob did all the driving on this one, as he did on most of the other studies. And so it's common. We found Manhattan, hundreds of leaks in Manhattan, Durham, North Carolina. It's a problem that's widespread. We also know it's no surprise why. It's old pipes. And here's the town of Newton where I live, and you can see here's an 8-inch cast iron low pressure 1913. Okay, some of these cast iron leak-prone pipes go back over a century. And I want to also point out here in Newton, all of these gray pipes here are operating at, it says 14 inches water column. That's about a ½ pound per square inch. It's actually really low pressure, but they're still leaking out of those low pressure pipes. But there's this legacy, a historical legacy of the gas infrastructure, the way it was built out as town by town, and then they kind of meshed together. So you can go to places like Wellesley, right across here, and now that's operating at 2 PSI pipes. So ½ a PSI, 2 PSI, all this blue stuff, 4 times as high. You go right up here into Wellesley, a little bit of Wellesley, that's all that red stuff, that's 60 PSI, 60 pounds per square inch. So the same leak, the same hole in a pipe here, if it were over here, it'd be 120 times as high, because the more the pressure for a given hole, the more the leak would be coming out. And so here's Acton. And so all of your pipeline system is 60 PSI. Okay, it's pretty high pressure for what we call a low pressure distribution system. It's pretty high. So just looking at some of these selected pipes, is that a 1930 pipe there? Here's a 1930 pipe, all 60 pounds. Coated steel, here's coated steel. I'm actually a little bit confused. Maybe Bob could weigh in on this. Coated steel is not considered to be all that leak prone, but this is old coated steel. So maybe we can get your thoughts on that in a little bit. Here's Route 2, and Route 2 actually runs at 200 PSI, so it's like a feeder, it's like trunk line, and then it goes into these regulating stations here with the stars that ramp it down to the 60 PSI and distribute it around. So when Audrey said that Acton was a big super emitter place, it makes sense given the higher pressure that you're operating at. So let's talk a bit about the greenhouse gas impact. And you already heard it's like a greenhouse gas on steroids. It's much stronger than carbon dioxide on a pound for pound basis. And that study that found that 2.7% is leaked from all of this distribution system, well, that was done by Catherine McCain and a bunch of authors here. And what we did was we used some tower measurements of methane on the top of the Prudential building, on the top of our building at BU, on an upwind site at Harvard Forest here, and at a peninsular site at Nahant. And we just looked at all of that blue shading is where gas is consumed. And as the winds move over, slabs of air move over from the prevailing winds, it basically, all the leaks build up, and we measure them on the top of these towers and buildings. And that allows us to use models to say, it was 2.7%. I'm not going to bore you with the details here, but these were the data that said 2.7% of the gas that is delivered into the Commonwealth is leaked into the atmosphere, and that accounts for about 10% of the greenhouse gas emissions inventory. Now, there's been some back and forth on, well, that was one study, and it has its own set of limitations and constraints, and yes, every study has its own limitations and constraints, and I just want to show you that the industry's own data in 2016, they're reporting 2.3% what they call pipeline and distribution use, which is defined as known volumes of natural gas that were the result of leaks, damage, accidents, migration, or blowdowns. Known volumes. So 2.3% amounts to about 8.5% of the greenhouse gas inventory. It's not a whole lot different than what we estimated from our study. So I don't think we're that far apart, actually. So just moving on to some solutions, and this was the study that Margaret Hendrick led that found that the 7% of the leaks amounted for 50% of the lost gas. And as a researcher, I've never in my life seen a result that was so clearly, like giving you what the policy should be. It just tells you what to do, basically. If you can find those super emitters, those are the ones that you want to fix. And so this is Margaret and her colleagues here measuring some of the leaks out in Newton and quantifying that. And so just to end with a couple solutions, areas of solutions. Now that we know that we can find those big leaks, well, let's find and fix those. And paired with that is what I call triage and transition. And this term here reflects the change in my own thinking over the last couple of years, because I had been always saying, well, the real solution to this is not to just bandage these leaks in these pipes, it's to actually replace the pipes. But that always bothered me, because I'm like, I know what I'm just saying is like, oh, this locks us in for another 50 or 60 years. It's like rebuilding the bridge. They call it a bridge fuel. It's like putting brand new struts on this bridge. But this study that Margaret did that found that we can cost effectively triage the system while we transition in the kinds of things that's happening here and that you're leading on in Acton, it actually gives me hope that we have some directions that we can move in and make the transition that we all want to make to the renewable future. And with that, I'll just thank, there's Margaret Hendrick and Bob and the set of organizations that have been really helpful and supportive. And mothers out front, thank you so much. You've been such a leader in this whole thing. It's been just amazing to work with you. So thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Phillips. The next person I'd like to introduce is State Senator Jamie Eldridge, who will be speaking to us about some legislative actions that are in process. So thank you, Jamie.
Well, good evening, everyone. I want to thank Mothers Out Front for inviting me and for organizing this, as well as Green Acton, and really appreciate the leadership of municipal officials like Katie Green and the whole Acton Board of Selectmen. Follow Margaret and Nathan's work very closely, and always great to see Bob Ackley. I've been driving around Acton past few months, seeing you all over the streets, so good to see you. And for those who don't know Bob as well, Bob has had a major presence at the State House on a lot of the gas leaks legislation that is passed, and I've been proud to have filed with Representative Lori Ehrlich, which have passed into law, but of course there's more to be done. But Bob, I really appreciate your leadership and persistence and activism, as well as everybody here. I'm just so proud of what Acton has done, including the students here. It's just really impressive and inspiring, and just sort of highlight some of the ways that Acton is a leader before talking about some of the policies. I mean, going back to the 2008 Green Communities Act and the Global Warming Solutions Act and other climate change legislation led by Governor Patrick and a number of legislators, is, Acton was one of the first communities to become a green community, but perhaps most importantly, in my opinion, is how Acton used that money. They used a large portion of that money to hire an energy efficiency manager for the Acton Box Rural School System, and that was Kate Crosby. And I think in that first year, Kate had saved 4, 5, 6, 7 times as much money for the school district as her salary. So that's just shows you the kind of impact energy efficiency and having sustainability practices at the local level. Acton was one of the first towns to put on its old town dump solar array. That was one of the first towns in Massachusetts to do that, provide alternative energy to help power the town. More recently, the Acton Box Rural High School system got a battery storage grant from the administration. Really the next phase, if we're really serious about moving to 100% renewable energy, is battery storage. And then most recently, the Department of Energy Resources announced a microgrid grant for the Stop and Shop Plaza Acton Water District. So just very proud about how Acton's been a lead on so many issues. It translates to the fact that so many of those items either came initially from a state grant or state law. And so the handouts that I've given you are some action items. The sort of backing up slightly is that, part of the reason that Acton has made such progress and done so much work on gas leaks is that we did pass really the first law to hold utilities accountable in quite a long time in 2014. So that required utilities to sort of map out where these gas leaks were and come up with a plan to seal at least some of the major gas leaks, not the grade 3, but the more higher priority gas leaks. And so there's been a lot of progress there, but obviously still not enough is being done. I find it particularly outrageous to see, these charts and graphs and pictures about both the impact the gas leaks are having on our environment and our trees, our public health, but also the cost and making sure that we're moving away from that. So the legislation that I filed this session with Representative Christine Barber, and this is the first handout. It doesn't have it's just a one-sided handout. Senate 1845, House 2683, an act relative to protecting consumers of gas and electricity from paying for leaked and unaccounted for gas. Very straightforward title name. What the bill would prohibit is our utility companies from charging all of us for the gas leaks. And, obviously that's the reason, in my opinion, why you still have so many gas leaks that haven't been sealed, is that the utilities can just charge all of us for that unaccounted for gas. Particularly disturbing fact. So this bill would prohibit utility companies from charging us for that unaccounted for gas, and therefore hopefully they would move more quickly to seal these leaks. The bill itself was included in part of a Senate Omnibus Clean Energy Bill, and that's the second handout. At the top it says take action. So this is where we get into the take action focus. So I won't go into all the details of the Senate Omnibus Clean Energy Bill, but it does everything from eliminate net metering caps for solar, requires utilities to purchase more offshore wind and solar. It requires a higher standard for gas pipeline and transmission projects. It requires the state to consider environmental impacts to hopefully stop these pipelines, and I've been involved in working to stop a number of pipelines, including successfully the Kinder Morgan pipeline, which was going to go through part of the northern part of my district. The bill also prohibits a pipeline tax on electric ratepayers. So again, the administration was trying to charge all of us to build more of a gas pipeline. The bill that I described earlier is in this bigger bill. And so this bill is now before the Senate Ways and Means Committee. So in terms of the action item, it would be contacting Senate President Harriet Chandler, the Senate President, so calling or emailing her and asking her to report the bill, bring the bill to the floor for a vote, and then contacting your state senator, if I don't happen to represent you, and urging the senators to contact the Senate Ways and Means Chair, Karen Spilka, to report the bill out favorably. So that's one action item on the Senate side. Unfortunately, almost all of the clean energy bills in the Telecom, Utilities, and Energy Committee were sent to study, which is deeply disappointing, but I think the challenge on Beacon Hill is that we did pass a major energy bill last session, and unfortunately, we weren't able to get many bills out of that committee. So what the Senate did is it sort of put together most of those bills into this omnibus bill. So we have a really good chance of passing that on the Senate side. On the other side of the page, Senate 2196, the CAMP bill, an act providing for the establishment of a comprehensive adaptation management plan in response to climate change. So this would basically charge all state agencies, the administration, with having a climate resiliency plan, having funding to address the impacts of climate change we're already seeing. We saw a lot of it just recently with, a dumpster floating down downtown Boston, and the damage to a lot of shore communities in Massachusetts. So the bill would basically charge the state with really finally beginning to address climate resiliency and adaptation. The Senate has passed this bill, so it's in the House Ways and Means Committee. So I'd urge you to contact Speaker DeLeo, ask him to bring the bill to the floor for a vote, or contact your state representative and ask them to contact the House Ways and Means Committee to report the bill out favorably. This is a bill that the Senate, I think, has passed 4 or 5 times, and Governor Baker has filed a similar bill, although the Senate bill is stronger. And so we're really hoping that this bill will pass this session. So those are sort of the major, items. I think it would be extremely disappointing for the legislature to not pass climate change and energy bill this session. And for those of you that are less familiar with the legislative process, we finish our formal session July 31st. So we only have, several months before the end of the session because it's an election year. So really hoping you can take action. I've seen the impact of Mothers Out Front on the different pieces of gas leaks legislation. I've seen them at Boston City Council when I've testified and seen Boston City Council pass a very strong bylaw around gas leaks. So incredibly impressed with their effectiveness, and really urge everyone to contact your state representative and state senator to take action on these items. So thank you very much for having me, and this is a great turnout. Thank you.
So if our presenters would just come to this table for questions, and for the 2 students, if we have questions, we'll just hand you the mic. So are there questions for any of our presenters tonight? Jane's going to bring the microphone. It's not on. Would you turn it on?
Hello, my name is Steve Cornell. I'm a hazmat technician, and my question is, are you testing for methane or are you testing for natural gas? They're 2 different gases.
Our detector that mapped all of the leaks that you saw is a methane detector.
Right, so why did you advertise this as a natural gas?
Because we use 2 different ways to confirm that it's natural gas. One is ethane is a tracer that's found in natural gas that's not found in biogenic gas. And secondly, the carbon in the methane has an isotopic signature that makes it detectable as deep thermogenic gas compared to the biogenic gas. So in the McCain paper, we did extra tests to verify the source of the gas.
So you didn't test for methane, you tested for actual natural gas?
We confirmed that the methane was thermogenic methane, and that means it came through the pipes of natural gas.
There is no methane in natural gas. I'm a hazmat technician.
No, I think you're not listening to that. Yeah, thank you.
No, I'm a hazmat technician. I know I will.
Okay, is there another question? Thank you. Jane, right there.
So just to clarify, natural gas is over 90% methane, just in case anybody was confused by that one.
I just had a clarifying question. When you were talking about the things that people could do at home, one thing was put in insulation, and then you used the term air sealing. And I had a little bit of a problem there, but I got my wits about me, and I think what was meant that you keep air from going into the house and taking the heat out. It's like air leakage. Am I right there?
Yes, thank you. Air sealing's the technical term for reducing drafts. So you go up in the attic and in the basement and find where the holes are that are letting the air out.
Right, and you seal the holes.
Yeah, you seal them in that way. It keeps that, it's like a windbreaker for your house.
Right.
Thank you. Another question over here, Jane? Okay.
I'm Mary Donald. I have a question for Dr. Phillips. What kind of material are you going to use to seal the leaks, and how long will that last?
Actually, Bob would be a really good person to answer that question, but I know there's sleeves that you can put in. Do you want to talk a little bit about that, Bob?
All the gas company does on these pipes is put a clamp. It's a sleeve that goes over the pipe and is bolted down over the leak.
What kind of material is it made of?
Typically stainless steel is the ones I've seen with a rubber gasket underneath, and they just have a series of bolts and they put it right over it. Just like you're gonna put your hand over the pipe. The leak's right here, you put a clamp on it. That's all they do.
Is the concern like a chemical concern? Is that what you're concerned about?
Well, how long is it going to last before we have to start over?
That's a great point, and that's why I think that we have some directions now that we can actually move off of these pipelines altogether. I mean, I think about this old infrastructure. It's kind of like if the lights that we have to replace in our houses, instead of having like this socket that you just take the light out and swap it out, it's like you have to dig through the sheetrock every single time. That's what they do to our streets every day. They dig them up. This is 19th century infrastructure, and it's really time for us to move into the 21st century.
A couple more questions over there, Jane.
Hi, I'm Dennis Loria. I'm on the Green Advisory Board. Excuse me. Just curious, so the distribution pressure in Acton is 60 pounds, but in most residential areas is much less than that, and the appliances that run off of natural gas only need a couple inches of pressure. So has anybody talked to National Grid about lowering the distribution pressure to reduce the amount of leaks?
That's a really good question, but I think that one, and again, I defer to Bob, and Audrey may have some thoughts on this as well, but I don't think it's not random, the fact that the exurbs like Acton and other places have these high pressures, because there's longer distances on roads. You have more like rural country roads, so to regulate the pressure on those long distance runs, they need to operate at a higher pressure. But could they drop it down to 20 PSI? Maybe, and if they did, that could be a way to reduce the leak rate by a third if all other things were equal. I don't know about the interconnections at the house and at the meter and the appliances. That's something I'm not too sure about.
And there was a state report that said that dropping the pressure just even a little bit would, during the summer, for instance, when not so many people are using gas, would have a huge effect on reducing the wasted gas.
Hi, Sal Alonso here. Thank you, everybody, for bringing this to our attention. This is really important. That first picture you showed where the rotted pipe was really, really powerful. So my question is really, this repair thing. You're going to put a clamp on a pipe, and it's going to leak again, and you're going to continually battle this for the next 20 years till this process is finished and we change over to a new system. But it's like we're spending, $100 million every year. So my question is, like, can we get vast areas of pipe changed in a bill versus some of these smaller fixes, which seems like it's going to just perpetuate this leaking?
Yeah, so, we're both like.
You go.
Okay, so actually the utilities are replacing over the next 17 years, all of the leak-prone, the old gas infrastructure, which is about 30% of all the pipes across Massachusetts. The present cost of that per mile is about $1.7 million. So to replace all of that infrastructure across the state, it'll be over $9 billion with a B, dollars. And our current question is that really what we want to spend our money on? To replace an infrastructure from the last century, which imports an explosive gas into your house that hurts the planet, that's bad for your health, rather than spending that money on the infrastructure that we know we want, which is clean, local, and renewable, that will help the current, the local economy. And certainly we do have to replace some of the pipes, absolutely. But how many and how much is the real question.
Hi, Michael Hurley, hi. And as Sal said, thanks so much for bringing this to everyone's attention. It seems so serious. This is Acton. If this is happening in Acton, obviously it's happening everywhere, Boston, every other city, and certainly the older cities in New England, but throughout the country. When you gave that 10% of greenhouse gas emissions in Massachusetts, that's a pretty serious figure, especially as it includes transport and everything else, which if you apply that globally, it seems like it could be a huge percentage of greenhouse gas emissions in the world. And there have been many who've spoken of methane as being one of the major triggers for extinction, which may be coming sooner rather than later simply because of methane, such as the methane blooms in the Arctic. So is there a national or a global effort to coordinate? It's great what you're doing here, but this seems like such a serious issue. I heard nothing of any national coordination to address this problem on a national and or global scale. Can anyone address that?
I'm sure there's federal legislation, and our United States Senator Ed Markey is one of the leaders in the U.S. Senate on climate change, and I know he did a report that America Pays for Gas Leaks report prepared by Senator Markey in 2013. So I don't know specifically what he's filed. I would say generally when it comes to energy policy, and this is where such a big turnout here is so important, is that most energy policies are at the state level. So solar policy, offshore wind, holding utilities accountable. At the end of the day, that's mostly state legislation and not federal, although obviously, a bigger plan on climate change is going to have to happen at the national level. And President Obama, was beginning to do that. But I would say most of these decisions, as far as holding utility companies accountable, are at the state level.
I would just add that there's two things that give me quite a bit of hope, and one is it's economic. It's the market for solar and wind and storage, battery storage, are relentlessly scaling. It's a race against time. but the market forces are there for these things to increase exponentially. So that's one great thing. And then the other thing is that I've seen that the new infrastructure for fossil fuels is being contested every single place it's going in across the nation, in Canada, and across the globe. And when Senator Eldridge talked about the work that he did to help stop the Northeast direct pipeline, that's the kind of public groundswell that comes out and really has had a big impact on the ability for the fossil fuel industry to continue to build out their infrastructure.
Hi, I'm Franny Osmond. I have a question about the pressure, just so I can get it. Compared to blowing in a straw or compared to the gas that comes out of my stove, what is 60 pounds per square inch? How do you define that? I don't have a sense of what it is.
It's like between a mountain bike tire and a 10-speed tire. 10-speed tire is like about 90 PSI, mountain bike tire is about 40, so it's kind of halfway in between.
Nathan bikes a lot.
In one of those tires, it's like the way...
Yes, if you put a pinprick or a nail and, the air would come rushing out and the gas would come out at the same rate. Now, of course, the pipe is below ground, so there can be soil above it. There can be other things that impede it, but it would come out at that same rate if you poked a mountain bike tire with a nail.
Go ahead, please.
Yeah, my name's Dan Grower. So Jamie, I think I remember that Governor Baker actually is sort of promoting pipelines in Massachusetts. Is that true? I'm not just trying to be inflammatory.
Yeah, neither me, but not just sort of. Yeah, he was actively and continues to actively support gas pipelines. And what's really happened is, for a while, the utility companies were at least not forcefully opposing clean energy legislation, but beginning last session they have, because quite honestly I think it's hurting their profit margin, and so they've been very aggressively pushing gas pipelines, and disgracefully even there's been a number of Boston Globe editorials that have been very pro-pipeline, so that's sort of what we're up against.
Right, okay, so an interesting thing when you're thinking about Governor Baker as a candidate.
We have another question over here. Thank you.
And not to say anything, but the other candidates for governor are not pro-pipeline.
Hi, thank you. This has been very informative. I have two questions. One was about what happened back there when the man left the room, but I'm going to hold off on that question. And because the second question, and so that first question was directed to you professionals. My second question is to you two young students. I guess I'm curious what drew you or attracted you to doing this research, and how it's affected what your response has been, personally and academically.
Okay. I mainly got into this issue because I felt like it wasn't, you hear a lot about cars causing emissions and factories causing emissions, but natural gas leaks is not something that comes to the front of your mind when you're thinking about major emission sources to fix. And so I felt like it would be really good to bring more attention to this issue, which it looks like has been pretty successful. There's a lot of people here. Yeah. And it also, just for me personally, it was a interesting technical issue because you had all these data sources, but they're not in the same format, and even the National Grid and the other companies, they don't release their data in a very readable way, like several page-long reports kind of thing. So it was really interesting to try and fit it all in one cohesive unit and then show it on a map in that way.
You want to ask the other question? You want to look the other there?
So I have been with the resource force for, I would say, about 3 years, and before that I worked with Kate in the junior high with some other projects. So when Kate told me about working with at least natural gas or methane leaking, I thought it was something really new. So I thought it would be a good chance to almost like go into it, because like you never really come across methane gas that's leaking and no one's fixing it. You almost have this expectation that someone's going to come in the near future and fix those gas leaks, and those leaks are going to be fine, and that's that. Everything will be taken care of. But finding out that that was not necessarily the case and investigating that process was, I think, more enlightening to see what's the truth behind it, and we've all learned so much from that. So.
There you go. I just like to, actually, are you ready? There's a couple other students here, and I won't put Sophia on the spot, but Tara.
Hi, I'm Tara. I'm also in Resource Force, and I actually just joined Resource Force because of this issue. Kate came to my environmental science class and talked about it, and I thought that it was so interesting because, kind of like Kevin said, it's not one of the issues you hear that much about, and kind of the idea that it was something new and just starting to be learned about was really kind of approachable to me in a way, because there isn't that much learned about it, and so there was an opportunity to really get involved in something kind of on a smaller scale, if that makes sense. And so just like Kevin and Vaibhav said, I've gotten a lot out of it personally. Like being able to come to these kinds of events and speak in front of people has been, I mean, just a huge experience. Like we went to the DPU hearing in Boston, and that is something I won't ever forget, because I mean, I would never have done something like that if it wasn't for this. So yeah, I've really gotten a lot out of being involved in whatever small way we can. Thank you.
Any other questions tonight?
Can I ask my second question?
Of course.
That happened so fast. It happened so fast. I think this gentleman, I don't know where he was from, I think he was claiming that he was questioning whether or not there's methane in natural gas. And he left the room in a huff. And I was just wanting to understand what happened. It just happened so quickly, and it was so jarring to me. Can anyone tell me what happened?
Maybe I'd be curious to hear from one or more of you about that kind of opposition that you must be getting all the time.
Well, it's no one really questions that the natural gas is 90 to 95% methane. It's very clear that's why it ignites. But there are a lot of things in that last 5 or 10% that we actually don't really know well. No one knows well. What we're starting to find out is some of the stuff that is injected in fracking, a lot of volatile compounds, some of which are carcinogenic, are found in that gas. So if that gentleman were to come back in, or I'd engage that question and get together and talk about, well, let's think about what is in this gas, because there are some unknowns, but it is clear that the methane is absolutely in there, and it's the dominating compound.
My impression from when I took the mic away from him is he did not want to hear the answer. He was answered many times. There was some opposition there, I think.
So just a clarifying question, Dr. Phillips. So when you talked about the other compounds that were in the gas, are you saying that when we receive gas or use gas, those compounds are still in the gas? So like when I'm smelling it in my kitchen, for example?
Yes, and that's concerning. The people in Porter Ranch, California that were getting dosed with this gigantic gas leak, we can see the same levels on the streets in greater Boston in terms of concentrations of gas. So if you're walking your kid to school every day past a gas leak and it's wafting like that, a question is, are you getting some health impact?
Thank you. Any other, I see a couple more questions. We have about 5 more minutes for questions, so if we could just be brief with these last 3.
Tara Fredericks from Acton, running for selectman, please vote for me. So I want to just add to what Jimmy was saying about Governor Baker, because he's also promoting Hydro Quebec coming all the way down through Vermont and New Hampshire, and biomass, burning stuff as renewable energy. So let's be careful with some of these definitions. And what I want to say was, I want to get an update, but I'll lead my update with a comment that will position my question, is that during the NED pipeline controversy, stopping that, I think that the hardest part was convincing our officials that we had the authority to say no, that these companies lobby Washington and they put things in place that seem like we have no authority, but we have so much authority. And part of that is our municipal authority to say no to expansions and to make requirements locally. And I think that you guys are working statewide on a couple of municipal bylaws or municipal ordinances and bylaws. Can you give us an update on that? Thank you.
Yeah, I'm sorry, the state is working on municipal bylaws?
State, great. So the state's passing bills and working towards them and take a long, long time. But we can pass municipal bylaws and ordinances now. And there's been something in Boston, and we're doing something here in Acton.
Why don't you come up, Katie?
Yeah, and so I just want to get an update on that, because I've discovered that a lot of these municipal attorneys also have their corporate clients on the other side of their business, which work for the utilities. So I just wanted to make that point. Thank you.
Right, thanks, sir. So again, as I mentioned earlier, when National Grid is coming before us for, their connections are actually coming for a street cutting permit. And so we've thought about and looked into, can we deny those permits when they're requesting those as a way to try to prevent new connections, or to say that they have to repair leaks or things like that. And so Boston did pass a sort of similar bylaw, and that has, I believe it was National Grid, I don't know if it was others, have sued them, and there's an injunction on the bylaw, and they're in the courts right now. So we're sort of following that case before attempting to pass a bylaw of our own, because we don't want to pass something that then is just going to be overturned. And again, just because there was already an injunction on it, so we feel the same would happen here. So we're waiting to see a bit how that is working. And then again, at the same time though, are trying to think about ways to discourage new connections to natural gas before they get to that point. Because you know, a lot of the issue is we're seeing when there are new developments, developers want to put in the, want to connect to natural gas, and so they build their houses that way, and then it's very, you know, it's almost too late. And so we're trying to, and we're working with Green Acton and some of our town departments, again, Corey, our town engineer, and our building department and others, to talk about ways to encourage and maybe look at ways to incentivize the use of air source heat pumps as opposed to natural gas. So that's one of the ways we're trying to do that. And then you can go to the table back where Deborah and Jim are to sign up. Once you get connected to electricity and have air source heat pumps, then get your electricity to be green. So you can join the Acton Power Trace Green option. It's very simple to do. I've done it. It hasn't made a huge impact on my energy bill, but it's all 100% local renewables, which is much better than you're getting from National Grid or Eversource or others. So those are some of the ways, but in terms of the municipal bylaw right now, we're kind of waiting to see how Boston's plays out.
If I could just add to what Katie said to answer Tara's question about, you know, empowering communities, or in some cases property owners, to oppose pipelines or other fossil fuel infrastructure. The Senate Comprehensive Energy Bill, Senate 302, does give property owners more rights to prohibit utilities from going on property without their approval. It requires the Energy Facility Siting Board to consider a project's impact on the environment. So for example, I represent the town of Sudbury, and there is a electric transmission line proposed by Eversource, which the town is trying to stop. It would make sure the environment, in other words, all the trees being cut down, possible use of pesticides to be, those would have to be factors before the EFSB would approve it. And then perhaps more broadly, sort of, adding to Katie's great work here in Acton is, if we're really serious about stopping fossil fuel infrastructure, we need to move towards 100% renewable energy in Massachusetts, and so I have filed that bill, and there is language in this comprehensive bill that would move Massachusetts to 100% renewable energy by 2035. So, in the end, that's really, we need to, think boldly and stop any more fossil fuel infrastructure from being built in Massachusetts.
Thank you. We have time for one more short question in the back. Jane? It's our last question.
Thank you. It's actually not so much a question as it is, the point was made that, somewhere, I can't remember who, that this 19th century technology where we bring this combustible substance into our homes that has health effects on trees, major emissions, yada, yada, yada. Not only do we not want to build new infrastructure, but we really need to be savvy to the whole fracking industry, because when we use gas, most of that's coming from fracked sources. Fracking, if you don't know about it, go learn about it. It's a nightmare technology. You talk about methane going unburned right at the wellheads, all along transmission lines. So I just want to say that about fracking. And the thing you can do tonight, if you haven't already, is come back here, sign up for 100% local, New England, high quality, low impact, excellent renewables. Thank you.
Jude. Thank you to our guests. Thank you, everyone, for being here tonight. I have three, maybe four things to say. One is go home and look up www.gasleaks.info. It's all the maps. It's the resource force, incredible work. And look up your house. Look up these leaks. You'll find them. Deborah said, sign up for Acton Powered Choice. It's incredibly easy. You call up a number, she has a number back there, you give them your account, and it's done. And then all of your electricity is renewable and local. So you're moving off of fossil fuels, and that's really ultimately what we need to be doing. Visit the back table there. Mary is there with a induction stovetop, another way of thinking about energy. She's not quite there. Energy, your stove, everyone says they love their gas. Well, there's another way of doing it, which the famous chefs of the world and in Europe are doing, and it's pretty amazing. And then the last piece is that I have a handout from National Grid. They weren't able to be here tonight because they've been working on snowstorms. And they also were saying they are in touch with our town engineer, Corey York, who is here tonight, and they are planning to replace the gas main on Prospect Street from Main Street to Central. So the recent storms have delayed them, but that is happening. So Corey's been doing a fabulous job keeping communication lines open with them. So again, we got the building for another half an hour. There's snacks in the front, and thank you all for coming out this evening.